Shalom vänner, profetisk uppdatering 14 mars 2025. Och jag vill ta upp något om delningen av landet. Det gäller Israel. Delningen av landet Israel. Men först lite kortnyheter från All Israel News. Rubrikerna därifrån. Israel slår till mot Hamas och PIJ-mål i Syrien som en drastisk varning till ledaren al-Shara. Israel skickar humanitära hjälppaket till druserna i södra Syrien. Och nästa nyhet, IDF arresterar 12 palestinska terrormisstänkta, beslagtar stora vapenlager inklusive sprängladdningar. Trots överenskommelser mellan druserna och den syriska regimen bibehåller Israel närvaro på den syriska toppen av berget Hermon. Slutcitat. Och det förstår vi mycket väl därför att där uppe i norr är Israel väldigt utsatt och måste ha superkontroll för att skydda sitt land. Rapporter har ju strömmat in från Syrien den senaste tiden om massavrättningar, massakrer av alaviter i kustområdena i Syrien, och även druser och kristna har drabbats som bor i området. Många har mördats och siffran är tusentals. Och det är framförallt Amir Sarfati som har delat det här på Telegram och lagt ut videor och bevismaterial. Och vad ska man säga? Europas ledare tog emot Syriens nya diktator, då klädd i slips och kostym. Om de hade lyssnat på Israel, då hade de vetat och fattat att han är en IS-terrorist och inte ett dugg bättre än diktatorn Assad. Nu har al-Julani visat sitt rätta ansikte. Och det som är lite märkligt i alltihop det här är ju att både druserna har ropat efter IDFs hjälp och alaviterna har ropat efter Israels hjälp militärt. Alltså de som tillhörde Assad och som tidigare alltid har varit Israels fiender, hatat Israel utan orsak, precis som sin ledare Assad, har nu då ropat efter Israels hjälp militärt. Och vi kan konstatera att till sist vet alla i hela Mellanöstern att det enda landet och den enda armén som man kan lita på är Israel och IDF. Judarna är de enda som står för fred och för sunda värderingar i Mellanöstern, skulle jag vilja påstå. Bibliska värderingar, sagt med modifikation, för Israel utförs aborter varje år även om befolkningen ökar. Och jag läste på nätet att judendomen är emot abort och tillåter bara abort om moderns liv är i fara. Men det är ju mycket där som sker. Men i stort sett så vet vi att Israel värnar livet och inte döden och den dödskultur som islamisterna står för. Och alla dessa terrororganisationer och andra. Då går vi till profetian i Joels bok kapitel 3 och läser från vers 1. Se i de dagarna på den tiden, när jag gör slut på Judas och Jerusalems fångenskap, skall jag samla alla hedna folk och föra dem ner till Josafats dal. Där ska jag hålla dom över dem för mitt folks, min arvedel Israels skull, som de har förskingrat bland hedna folken. De har delat mitt land och kastat lott om mitt folk. Ja, att kasta lott om Guds folk, det kan man ju lätt tolka till skurkorganisationen FNs alla sjuka fördömanden av Israel och sätt att handla mot Israel. Det är ju fullständigt hyckleri. Men detta att de har delat mitt land, bryr sig Gud? Ja. Han bryr sig och han kommer att döma folken som i orättfärdighet har delat hans land. Sedan många år har vi ju hört ordet tvåstatslösning. Men sedan 7 oktober 2023, den terrororganisationen Hamas massaker på israeler så är ju den idén ganska död och borde begravas för gott. Men hur går det med profetian? Ja, om den ska uppfyllas ännu en gång, det får vi se. Men när vi såg för ett tag sedan på Roar Sörensens undervisning om Israel som vi också länkar till på hemsidan. Och då slog det mig när jag såg bilderna han visade där. Och jag kommer att lägga upp dem här från hans bilder, skärmbilder av det. Och då kan man ju se att landet är redan delat av FN. Om vi ser tillbaka till Balfour-deklarationen 1922, då landet var under brittisk mandat, så beslutades att hela landet skulle tillhöra judarna. Det ser vi tydligt på den här bilden. Nästa bild visar när FN tog beslut år 1947. Då hade man delat landet och styckat upp det. Som vi ser här på bilden. Judeen, Samarien och Gaza skulle vara arabiskt enligt FN. Och det slog mig att i den bemärkelsen är landet redan delat. FN delade landet. Nu vet vi att araberna tackar nej till den så kallade då tvåstatslösningen. Och när arabländerna runt omkring attackerade Israel efter självständighetsförklaringen 1948 vann judarna segrar på alla fronter. Mänskligt omöjligt, men Gud var med Israel, för de har både juridisk, historisk och biblisk rätt till landet Israel. Det kommer en dag när mer kommer att samlas emot Israel. Det läser vi om i Bibeln och vi läste om det här också. Det är Gud som samlar. Gud tillåter den här samlingen mot Israel, för i själva verket är det Gud som samlar för att döma alla som vill gå emot Israel och som vill utplåna Israel. Så om det kommer att bli en ytterligare delning, det vet vi inte, men om det inte skulle bli det så måste vi vara medvetna om att landet faktiskt redan är delat. Profetian är redan uppfylld. Om det var den slutliga uppfyllelsen eller om det kommer ännu en, det återstår att se. Jag fick en fråga om Herrens dag, om freden som ska komma i Mellanöstern och om Harmageddon. Och jag förklarar då att Herrens dag som det står om, det kan vara en bestämd tidsperiod, och det förstår vi av bibelordet att de sista 3,5 åren kallas Herrens dag. Men också den sista dagen, för Herrens dag kan ju också vara ett dygn. Jag brukar säga så att Herrens dag är de sista 3,5 åren som avslutas med Jesu återkomst. Och Herrens dag kan också då åsyfta enbart den dagen när Jesus kommer tillbaka. I vedermödan är det Satan och antikrist ande som härjar. Men vredesdomen är Gud som dömer och straffar till sist. Och vedermödan och vredesdomen är 2 skilda saker. De dödas uppståndelse och förvandlingen av alla som tillhör Jesus eller Jeshua, den sker när han kommer efter den sista vedermödan eller sista nöden, som det står, som Jesus säger själv i Matteus 24. Och vi kan läsa i första Thessalonikerbrevet 5 och vers 9. Ty Gud har inte bestämt oss till att drabbas av vredesdomen. Det står inte vedermödan, det står vredesdomen, och det är alltså Guds domar som sker det allra sista efter vedermödan. Utan till att vinna frälsning genom vår Herre Jesus Kristus. Det här pekar på evigheten, på det eviga livet. Vi ska inte drabbas av Guds domar och vredesdom utan få evigt liv. Det måste komma en fred i Mellanöstern innan det vi läser om i Hesekiel 38-39 om Gogs härnadståg. Det är kriget som verkar mynna ut i Harmageddon. Det står ju i Daniels bok att slutet kommer som en störtflod och att den senare hälften av den här 70:e årsveckan, de sista 7 åren och det 7-åriga avtalet, kommer det att vara krig. Det blir en fruktansvärd och turbulent tid. Men som vi vet så är ju Gud alltid med sitt folk och har alltid varit, och det är många som upplever vedermöda idag i många länder. Innan detta ska det ske ett avfall bland kristna i kyrkorna, alltså människor som bekänner sig som kristna. Kanske många aldrig var sanna kristna på nyttfödda, utan bara det vi kallar namnkristna eller kulturkristna, att man har lite kristna värderingar och bekänner sig då som kristen. Andra kanske helt enkelt faller av från tron. Det har i alla fall Bibeln förutsagt ett stort avfall. 10 politiska ledare ska träda fram, det vet vi, de 10 hornen som det kallas då i det profetiska ordet. Och därefter kommer en världsledare träda upp som kallas antikrist. Det här är ju i det allra slutet, för antikrist kommer att träda fram just då, när mitt i denna 7-årsperiod som talas om. Både i Daniels bok och i Uppenbarelseboken och i det profetiska ordet då. Det var i stora drag. Var vi exakt är, det vet vi inte, men profetierna ska uppfyllas och vi ska inte hoppa fram för snabbt, men samtidigt så ser vi att utvecklingen går otroligt fort och mycket kan hända på kort tid. Vi ska alltid vara beredda, vi ska alltid vara redo, för vi vet inte heller hur länge vi lever här på jorden, så vi måste alltid vara beredda på uppbrott. Det får vi vara varje dag. Jag tog upp om trosförkunnelsen och trosrörelsen och nya apostoliska reformationen, eller NAR, i förra profetiska uppdateringen. Och det var många som kände igen sig, förstod jag. Det som händer inom nya apostoliska reformationen, eller NAR, framförallt i USA idag, är ju väldigt aktuellt. Här blandar man politik och religion. Och NAR och trosrörelsen säger att kyrkan ska ta herravälde. Det ska bli en jätteväckelse över hela jorden och de ska kristna världen och ska kristna hela nationer, säger man, innan Jesus kommer tillbaka. Det talar alltså om en maktfullkomlig kyrka. Och detta sker med Sjöbergenläran, Sjöbergenmandatet som man säger, då man ska inta samhällets 7 sfärer. Jag nämnde det också förra uppdateringen. Och det sista och bland det värsta i dessa falska läror, obibliska läror, det är att de står för ersättningsteologi. De tror sig själva vara Guds Israel och att kyrkan då har ersatt Israel. Och det som är ganska upprörande här i Sverige, det är att många kristna tror på samma villolära utan att tro på då kyrkans maktfullkomlighet. De är uppenbart förblindade och kan inte läsa innantill, för så fungerar andlig förblindelse. Guds förbund och löfte till Abraham och hans efterkommande genom Isak, Jakob och de 12 stammarna var ett evigt förbund, säger Bibeln. Det eviga förbundet gäller både det bokstavliga judiska folket och landet Israel och alla som tror på Messias som skulle komma ur Juda stam. Den judiske Messias. Och därför handlar Gud med Israel hela tiden, hela vägen. Och när Israel är redo att ta emot Jesus, då har evangeliet nått alla folk, säger Bibeln som det står, och då kommer han tillbaka vid den här tidsålderns slut. Och det finns väldigt många bibelord jag kan ta upp, men jag gör det inte här. Men innan en video kommer här med David Tall om det senaste från Israel och Purim som man nu firar också, så ska vi läsa några verser från andra Korinthierbrevet 5, vers 17 Alltså, om någon är i Kristus är han en ny skapelse. Kristus eller Messias. Det gamla är förbi, se det nya har kommit. Allt kommer från Gud som har försonat oss med sig själv genom Kristus eller Messias och gett oss försoningens tjänst. Ty Gud var i Kristus och försonade världen med sig själv. Han tillräknade inte människorna deras överträdelser och han har anförtrott åt oss försoningens ord. Vi är alltså sändebud för Kristus. Det är Gud som förmanar genom oss. Vi ber å Kristi vägnar, låt försona er med Gud. Den som inte visste av synd, honom har Gud i vårt ställe gjort till synd eller syndoffer, för att vi i honom skulle stå rättfärdiga inför Gud. Det här är det viktigaste och det enda nödvändiga i livet. Att ta emot Guds förlåtelse och frälsning genom Jesus Kristus eller Messias och att vara försonad med Gud. Då behöver vi inte frukta för framtiden. Vi kan känna bävan för vi vet vad Bibeln säger. Men vi vet att Gud är undrens Gud och vi vet att han är trofast och att han har sagt åt oss att vi skall inte frukta. Vi är trygga och vår framtid är i Guds händer. Så det vill jag avsluta med här och jag önskar er en fin dag och Guds välsignelse och shalom. Shabbat shalom förresten, det är ju fredag idag. Shabbat shalom.
Well, as you can see, we are back in Israel. Me and Christy landed yesterday and we're up on the hills of Judea trying to connect a few more pieces of the Balagan. It's Purim, and if you can hear the music in the background, that is the schools having their Purim event. Purim is a celebration of the book of Esther, and the whole idea of Iranian leadership saying we want to destroy Israel, and Israelis doing, how do you say, special operations in the capital city of Iran, or as it was called back then, Persia, is part of what we're going to be talking today. We'll talk about Esther and the modern day Esther and how she connects. We are going to be talking about the hostages and how that connects to where we are. We're talking about what's going to happen, what's going on with Hamas, what's going on in Syria and Lebanon, what's going on in Yemen, and what's going on in the hearts of the mind of the Israeli people as we speak. This is David Tal. This is a Balagan Connection. Join me as we go through all these different Balaganim. And a quick reminder, we are here connected to a ministry called Gihon Springs. Check the link down below. It's a ministry that actually supports Christian ministries in Israel and supports the IDF. And we'll be talking about that as we go along. Let's start off with what's going on in Gaza. And here's the thing, mostly nothing. We're at the end of one stage of the ceasefire agreement that was kind of reached after President Trump came into office. And his special envoy, Witkoff, has actually trying to put together the second stage of the ceasefire. But a lot of things have changed since we signed the three-stage ceasefire. The main thing that's changed is that the American administration has realized how evil Hamas is. And now we understand that they have to be taken out. Hamas has to be eliminated. And no agreement, no ceasefire, no arrangement can allow the Hamas to stay in power in Gaza. On the ground right now, Israel is pulled out of Gaza. There are still 59 hostages, and we think at least 25 of them are alive in the tunnels in Gaza. And that is a major issue, and Israel's been trying to get as many of the hostages out as we can. The idea is, though, that Hamas is not going to give up his hostages unless it can stand at the end of this and say, we won. And this political situation is that the Trump administration is pushing for some kind of an agreement with the Hamas that makes the Hamas decide to leave Gaza. And the Hamas is saying, we're not going to leave Gaza no matter what. Trump met last week with hostages that came out of the tunnels, and he was appalled about what he heard from them. I mean, you could see him in the press release visibly shaken, and he went online and actually threatened Gaza, or threatened the Hamas in Gaza, saying that you are crazy if you believe that you're going to be able to keep hostages and live to tell the tale. So Trump is saying, return the hostages now, or all hell will break loose. Huge amounts of commentary have been going on what does that mean, all hell will break loose. Basically, what I think makes more sense than anything else, more reasonable than anything else, is Trump is going to say to the Israelis, do what you need to do. Israel has already cut off what they call humanitarian aid, and I would call supply and logistics to the Gaza Strip. No more food is going into the Gaza Strip. No more water is going to go into the Gaza Strip. And there's even talk about cutting off electricity and putting as much pressure on the Hamas in Gaza as possible. Before I forget, let's make this something very, very clear. No war in history has any combatant supplied the logistic needs of the enemy population. We didn't do that in Iraq. We didn't do that in World War II. We didn't do that in Japan. In no other war have we supplied the humanitarian aid and the supplies for the population as we were in war. Make another thing clear. One of the things that we, and I think the rest of the world understood, during this hostage release dynamics, is how evil the Hamas actually is. And I think the world has seen, I don't know if you remember the whole ceremonies of the release of the hostages and the whole evil, medieval craziness of the Bebus babies coming in coffins that they locked so we wouldn't be able to unlock them. That kind of weird, sicko, wacko ideal. The world has realized what we're dealing with, and that the population in Gaza is not innocent. They're not innocent citizens. They're not innocent civilians. They're a part of all of this. They've voted for the Hamas. They've supported the Hamas. Many of them have been housing, and we're getting the refugee stories, the hostage stories are coming out. Many of them have been housing the hostages in their own homes and humiliating them. And I'm not even going to talk, yes, we should talk about sexual abuse and psychological abuse and medical abuse and making them starve. This is what's coming out. This is how they treat the hostages, and this is not the Hamas organization. This is regular people in their houses with their kids sitting next to them. We're realizing that this is a different kind of war. So the world has actually, I think, agreed that either we reach some kind of an agreement with Hamas, and Hamas needs to leave, that's what the president has said, or we're going to have to go back in and finish off Hamas. Israel has amassed major amounts of military force on the borders of Hamas, and this time we're talking about, and again, I talked to some of the guys in the army yesterday, this time we're talking about going in with full force, clearing out the population if they want to get out of the battle zones, and completely going in and combing the whole Gaza Strip to make sure that Hamas is not left. Israel's on the verge of doing that, but there's still some kind of negotiation, some kind of, okay, let's try one more thing before that happens. And that's the situation right now. The big mega deal that President Trump has been talking about, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Egypt, Jordan, the big mega deal is on hold right now while all of this comes down. So that's the situation on the ground right now. Witkoff is right now in the Middle East, moving back and forth, trying to get a few more of the hostages out in return for a continued ceasefire. Basically saying to the Hamas, we will give you no war if you return some of the hostages, but if you return at least part of the hostages, we realize that we're not going to get them all. And I think there's a growing realization in Israel, which is a part of the problem, that the Hamas will never release all of the hostages. There's no initiative, there's no reason for them to release all the hostages, and that's the situation right now in Gaza. In the meantime, things are changing on the northern border. Israel went into Syria and bombed Syrian assets that are fighting against Syrian minorities. In a nutshell, Syrian is a country that was created after World War I out of different nationalities, Sunni, Shiite, Druze, which is a Mormon version of Islam or Islamic version of Mormons, Alawites, which is another version of that. And all of these have been fighting for years. And the only way to hold together a very diverse country like Syria, by the way, Lebanon is the same way, is by power, dictatorships. Now the dictatorship has changed. And it turns out that the Druze are being massacred by the Syrian main government in the south. And the Alawites, who were the minority that had ruled Syria, Hafez al-Assad, the president of Syria, was part of the Alawite minority. The Alawites are being massacred in their thousands in the northern part of Syria. By the way, not only Alawites, also Christians. So minorities are being massacred. They're being made to crawl like dogs on the ground before they're being shot. The women are being made to run naked through the streets before being killed. That is happening in Syria. And here's what I, as an Israeli, don't understand. If that's happening, why is the world silent? Why are there no demonstrations in Columbia University? Why are there no demonstrations in the streets of London about what's going on in Syria? And the only reason is, it's not Jews. It's not connected to Israel. We are the apple of God's eye. And when it doesn't connect to the apple of God's eye, nobody cares. That's why we carry this role on us. The Jews have asked Israel to help secure them, and Israel has extended a security blanket over the Druze population in Syria. And basically there's talk about making some kind of Druze autonomy on the southern part of Israel between us and Damascus. The Alawites, on the other hand, who are being slaughtered by the Sunnis, have asked Israel to help. And because the Alawite area is where the Russians used to have their bases, there's talk about some kind of an arrangement between Israel, Russians, Alawite, in order to defend the Alawites in the northern part of Syria. The irony of this is the Alawites hated Israel more than anybody else. The Hafez al-Assad regime did terrible things to the Israelis, including, and I hope Jacqueline is watching this, including an Israeli spy / operative who managed to wheel his way into the top of the administration in Damascus, who was tortured and killed terribly, named Eli Cohen. And we've been asking for his remains back, and the Alawite government has never allowed us to get his remains back. And you get a little bit of an understanding that we are not great lovers of the Alawites, but here's the irony. Now they're asking for us to save them. And we're seeing a growing understanding in the Middle East that Israel has become a power player, a power broker in the Middle East. Iran is down. Turkey is not yet in. And for reasons, not that we want to, but for reasons that we have no choice, Israel has become a major player in the whole Middle East situation. So that's a situation in Turkey, in Syria. Israel has been bombing and threatening to bomb the government assets in Syria if they threaten the Druze on the southern part or any Israeli assets. In the meantime, in Lebanon, again, another country that's come together mostly of different diverse, in Lebanon, the Hezbollah, who had been taking up the area in southern Lebanon and was running Lebanon, are completely dismantled, or almost completely dismantled. I got to be careful about this. So along the border with Lebanon and Israel, okay, there's Israeli outposts, and Israel is saying, if you want us to leave the southern border of Israel, the places in Lebanon that overlook Israeli communities that have been bombed, you have to put something in place that will be, I'm not going to say preferable, but will not be a threat to Israel. And the agreement between us and Lebanon from 2016 was, 2006, was to allow the Lebanese army, not the Hezbollah, into the positions in southern Lebanon. We are in the process of that, and last week 2 Israeli positions in southern Lebanon were turned over to the Lebanese army, and hopefully that will create the buffer, together with the support of the United States, together with allowing the Lebanese to open up their oil resources offshore, okay? All of this together will bring some kind of peace and tranquility. The couple that is living in my apartment, literally right over there behind the tall buildings right over there, who had left the border with Lebanon and moved down to Modi'in because it was dangerous, have decided that in 2 months they are willing to move back up to there. There's a whole discussion about that. But as we see, the northern border is quieting down unless something very, very different happens. In the meantime, Israel is very strategically and very surgically going into different parts of the West Bank, as in Judea and Samaria. We are now, excuse me, we are now in Judea. And facing me are the hills of Jerusalem. Literally, you can see the hills, the outskirts of Jerusalem, about half an hour drive away. And Israel is going into different parts in Judea and Samaria and clearing out the militant, jihadi, Hamas, elements inside parts of the West Bank that are not under the Palestinian Authority control. So we're fighting in Syria, we're fighting or dealing with Lebanon, we're dealing with the West Bank, and we're dealing with Gaza at the same time. And just to make the balagan more interesting, the Houthis have decided, remember the Houthis down in Yemen, that if Israel doesn't allow supply into the Gaza Strip, they will be closing off shipping on the Red Sea. They haven't threatened to fire rockets at Israel yet. But again, it's not like they're a threat, but they're a pinprick. There's something that Israel's going to have to deal with. So that is the, I'm going to say, security or the Middle East broad picture. Which brings me to Purim. And let's tie something down here that I think is kind of amazing. And again, the way the Balagan Connection brings these things together, I think, is fascinating. Purim is when we dress up. By the way, it's our version of Halloween, though without the evil, witches, ghosts, macabre, evil stuff. So it's all fun. And a lot of girls will dress up, little girls will dress up as Queen Esther. Boys will dress up now as soldiers or as policemen. And a lot of little girls will dress up as Wonder Woman. Now, why Wonder Woman? Because the actress who played Wonder Woman in the franchise, in the Marvel franchise, is a young Israeli named Gal Gadot. And most of you probably have heard the name. Gal Gadot played Wonder Woman. She played in a couple other movies. And it's very interesting. By the way, Israel's small enough that I actually know Gal Gadot. Well, I don't know her personally. I met her a couple of times because she was visiting hospitals where there were sick kids, and I was with a sick nephew once in a hospital, or a couple of times in a hospital where she came to visit. But here's the thing about Gal Gadot. Gal Gadot, together with the rest of the Israelis and the Jews in the Hollywood establishment during this whole war in Israel, hasn't been anti-Israel as opposed to some of them, but hasn't said or hasn't come out very strong in support of Israel. They tried to cancel her in the beginning. They couldn't cancel her because she's an A-level celebrity, but they tried to cancel her because she did serve in the Israeli army and again in genocide and baby killers and everything, but it didn't really work. Now, how this all comes together is that the Disney Corporation, who bought the rights to all kinds of things, the Star Wars universe as included, actually decided to do a live-action remake of Snow White. And they cast Rachel Zegler as Snow White, even though she's I'm going to say a DEI hire, for lack of a better word, because they cast a Colombian non-white actress to play the role of Snow White. And weirdly, they put Gal Gadot in the role of the evil witch. First of all, weird, because anybody who sees Rachel Zegler next to Gal Gadot will not believe that the evil witch is jealous of the beauty of Snow White, because the evil witch is so much more beautiful. Gal Gadot is one of the most beautiful women in the world, and I see if I can find a picture of them from the Oscars, okay, standing next to each other, you'll see what I mean. But Rachel Zegler, being a woke Hollywood actress who is a DEI hire, actually got into the whole Israel-Palestine issue. And even though she's actually co-starring in the movie next to Gal Gadot, said terrible things about Israel. Free Palestine, from the river to the sea. She was anti-Trump. She was, you know, and all of that. All of that comes together. So you've got Gal Gadot, the Israeli, you've got Rachel Zegler, and here's the thing. And I want to bring a couple of minutes of the recording because Gal has realized that she can't hide from who she is. And I want you to listen to a few minutes, and I'm going to bring up this clip, a few minutes of what she said after the Oscars, okay, to a group of Jewish, how do you say, in a Jewish event. And let's make this very clear. Okay, so here is Gal Gadot. Let's take a few minutes of this and continue.
My name is Gal. I'm a mother, a wife, a sister, a daughter, an actress. I'm Israeli, and I'm Jewish. I'm gonna say it again. My name is Gal, and I'm Jewish. Isn't it crazy that just saying that, just expressing such a simple fact about who I am, feels like a controversial statement? But sadly, this is where we're at today. I grew up in Rosh Hashanah, in the center of Israel. My mother was the daughter of a Holocaust survivor. Her father, my grandfather, Avraham Weiss, may he rest in peace, was born in what was then Czechoslovakia. He was the only one in his family who survived. His father died fighting for the Czech army when the Nazis invaded, and his mother and brother were murdered in the gas chambers of Auschwitz. He came to Israel with nothing and built a life for himself. And despite the horrors he endured, he always taught me the values of love, compassion, and tolerance. את לא משיגה שום דבר בכעס ובשנאה. You don't win anything with anger and hate, he used to tell me. Thank you. On my father's side, I'm the 8th generation to be born in the land of Israel. One of my ancestors was the very first chemist in the Shaarei Tzedek Hospital in Jerusalem. I'm very proud of both sides of my family, and they show the two sides of Israel. On the one hand, a country that provided a life raft for refugees fleeing the horrors of persecution, pogroms, and the Holocaust. And on the other hand, the historic homeland of the Jewish people, where our roots run deep and where we are an indigenous people.
I can't help but make the connection. Back then, Persia, Iran was the empire. And it was a beautiful Jewish woman whose job was to step in on the main stage of the Persian Empire and stand up for the Jewish people. Stand up for the Jewish people. And even though she wasn't there because she was Jewish, when she's there at the top of the top, I mean, these are the women who are at the top of their careers, at the top of their importance. I mean, Esther was in the court of the king of Persia, the emperor of Persia, Gal Gadot, Gal Gadot, at the top of her form in Hollywood, all of a sudden realized that they can't get away from who they are. All of a sudden realized that God put them in this place for such a time as this. That is what I think is fascinating. Esther in the ancient times, in the ancient empire, and on the biggest stage in the world back then, Gal Gadot in the modern times, the modern empire, on the biggest stage in the world, and Gal Gadot starts off with this: my name is Gal, and I'm Jewish. And I want to leave you with this. And again, this is something that more and more of us are starting to understand. My name is David, and I'm Jewish. I'm a father, I'm a soldier, I'm a born-again Christian, I'm everything. But my name is David, and I am part of the Jewish people. I'm part of the Jewish story. I'm part of the Jewish promise. Amazingly, I've managed to connect that promise to Jesus Christ. Amazingly, the Jewish people have survived all this time, and the last stage that they have to overcome, the last problem they have to overcome, the last issue that will make them the upgraded Jews that we want to be, is the connection to Jesus. Gal is not a Christian, but she's connected to her Jewish heritage. I'm a Christian, but I'm still connected to my Jewish heritage, and we're all connected to the Jewish story. That was Esther, now it's Hollywood. And I think that is an amazing Balagan connection to talk about today.